Gina Guddat is a licensed mental health therapist for over a decade and a half, a sought-after relationship and couples expert, and a concierge-style counsellor serving clients across the US and Europe. With a master's in psychology from Chapman University and a bachelor's from the University of Washington, she blends clinical expertise with a real-world experience as a mother of 4 granddaughters, and, although you find it hard to believe as I do, a grandmother. And, maybe this is why, former fitness coach. Gina has authored Love Metabolism Unwrapped, real questions asked by real girls about sex, and created fitness and teen empowerment programs. She's also a prominent humanitarian, working against trafficking and domestic violence, an acclaimed media contributor on ABC, CBS, NBC, Redbook, NPR, and many more. I could spend a lot more time going through all your credentials, but I think the best way to get to know you is to ask some questions, if that's okay. Thank you very much
Absolutely.
for taking the time to do this. I think the first one I wanted to ask is you have a very diverse portfolio of experience in therapy and fitness coaching and nonprofit leadership. How do you think those different roles have informed your unique perspective on intimacy and relationships?
Well, that's a good question. I think that what I've come to over the years is that your relationship, well, your primary relationships are actually the foundation or the grounding, rather, to everything else that you're going to do. And because I work with couples day in and day out that are
Mm,
in turmoil, they're in chaos, it feels like everything else suffers, right? That they're up all night fighting, so they don't get a good night rest, and then they don't perform well at work, and then they don't get their promotion, and they
mm,
just don't do well. So what I've learned is if your relationship is healthy, you can go conquer the world. Right? I mean, you have energy to do above and beyond even your regular work week. And I feel that way about fitness too. Of course, people that are fit tend to have more energy to do more things. So all the things I do, really, I couldn't do if I didn't have grounded relationships and that I had that type of support and
mhm.
encouragement at home, and I'm not in conflict all the time. So maybe that's why when you see people that are doing all these extra things, perhaps they have it figured out at home.
Yeah. When you were sort of growing up, your formative years, was that sort of relationship experience behavior, was that modeled at home and within the community you lived in?
Absolutely. My mother and father were older when they had me, and so they both worked for the Boeing company. They were
Mhm.
engineers in designing airplanes. My dad actually, and he was a lead designer on the 747 back in the day.
Wow.
But I could always count on that stable relationship and always encouraged to try everything. And there was this mantra that you could do anything you put your mind to. And if you don't like it, that's fine. Go try something else, right? Until you find your giftedness, till you find where your talents rest. And so I definitely had a good example growing up.
Mm. And were you was were intimacy and relationships, were they talked about? I think one of the common themes when I talk to people on this podcast is that a lot of people haven't had sex and intimacy and things. These things aren't necessarily talked about, and you go into the big wide world, and you're not actually quite sure what you like, what you don't like, what things should feel like, what things shouldn't feel like. So was it something that was talked about early on, or did you come to it later in life?
I definitely came to that piece later in life.
Mhm.
And even though my parents grew up, well, my father was born in the 1920s.
Okay.
So they absolutely, there was no birth control back then. There
Yeah.
was no legal abortion back then. So
Yeah.
it was very taboo and mostly couched in the church philosophies. I
Mhm.
was in the 80s, and you think the 80s were modern. Well, when we were in the 80s, we thought we were modern, but we really were not modern. I mean, it still was
No, no.
looked upon very poorly to move in together with someone unless you were
Yeah.
married and engaged, or go ask for birth control. Like, why would you, if you're not, in a marriage? So even then you should be having babies. So why do that? So this came to me much later when I start Fit Decisions Foundation, one of the first nonprofits that I started, where I was traveling around and talking to girls, teen girls, preteen girls, and using the book Unwrapped and answering all of their questions, which were very diverse. And they were great, but they weren't really allowed to be asked in the home. And I did that for 10 or 15 years. And my kids were also teenagers at that time, and they were touring with me. Now they're in their mid to late 30s, but I really had them as an asset.
Yeah, I guess for a lot of those girls, it was the first time they'd ever dared voice the question that they had. Yeah, it's sad. I was saying I've got an 18-year-old daughter, and I was sort of talking to her about what do they have at school? What's their sex education like? And it's, to be fair, it doesn't sound very much different to what it was when I was at school. It was pretty much about safe sex and avoiding STIs, and there's more about consent now, which is good. But talking about intimacy or desire, or is this normal, or how should this feel? And there's none of that. So I do feel for youngsters today is that there's a barrage of information coming at them. And I use that word as opposed to knowledge very intentionally. There's a barrage of information coming at them through this little device, and how on earth they are supposed to filter what's true and what's not true. And I think that the social media and lots of other forms of content create this very unrealistic expectation of what life, intimacy, love, sexuality should all be about, really. So where do you think the best place to get accurate, robust knowledge from is?
It would be wonderful if it was from the parents. That
Yeah,
would just be
would. Yep.
perfect. Unfortunately, the parents are also stymied and
Mm,
stalled in their conversations about intimacy and even with each other, right? In my
yeah.
office, things come up with couples. Maybe they were married 20 years, maybe they were married 30 years. They still aren't talking about what they like and what they don't
Yep.
like.
Yep.
And so, in a perfect world, it would be from the parents. It would not be from TikTok, and it would
No.
not be and it would not be from Hollywood. It would not be from Disney. And I
Yeah.
think there's some coaches that are doing better. I think there's community groups and some youth organizations that
Mm,
are talking more about it. But I'm oftentimes asked, what was the question that was um, maybe just like the most shocking that you got from teenage girls when you were traveling around doing that a lot? And it really was that they still believe, and this generation too, that there is a soulmate. They believe there is this one soulmate to find that's somehow out there, that they either will drop in their lap, or they'll pray for that, or they'll find it on the dating app or whatever. But this is still a notion that comes out of all of the music and all of the movies and all the
mm.
social media. And when I tell them, well, statistically, 7 out of 100 work. And it's shocking to them that, but it is true within their age and demographic and
Yeah.
socioeconomic. I mean, if they're shopping in the pool of like-minded people, there's about 7 out of 100 that could be decent life partners. And by the way, you probably are going to fall in love multiple times. And how you feel now at 16 or 13 or 14, you will feel this way again. So if you think this is true love and this is the soulmate, I have some news for you. You're going to have that. And so that's always a great conversation, is trying to find the one is not practical.
It's so funny you say that. I was watching a program last night on Netflix called Four Seasons, and it's a comedy with Steve Carell and Tina Fey, and it's like three couples go away to this their holiday house, and they literally have this conversation. And I sort of think there's four of them are, well, there's 8 billion people on the planet. How can there possibly one soulmate? And there's a couple of them are very much no. Yeah, I believe I was meant to find this person. So everything aligns. So the person you meant to meet literally worked in the office next to you, or literally was in your same soccer team, and you were the same age, and all. But you think about it rationally, and thankfully, like you say, we can make it work with lots of different people, and we will fall in love more than once. But sometimes when you're 13, you've had your heart broken. it
Ah,
feels like it's never going
yeah.
to recover, doesn't it? Yeah,
It's the one, and it's hard to convince them that there might be someone else. And same with the college age, because it
yeah,
is that age bracket of college where still the majority of people will find their life partner or their first life partner. Most
mm,
people have two or three, but in that is also just a revelation that that community in itself, a college community at the
yeah,
university, is pretty small.
yeah,
It's pretty small. And so if you're deciding to go away to college or to a certain region, you may end up staying there because the person that you commit to, their family may be there. So
mm,
think carefully about where you're going, because that oftentimes is where you get picked, or your picker is finding someone.
yeah. And exactly as you say, if you meet somebody at 18, 19, 20, and then in a relationship for 5, 10, 20 years, you often don't have well, you don't have a sort of a recurring conversation about let's just have a check in. So what feels good for you now? What the things that we've been doing for the last 20 years, are you still comfortable with those? Even though our bodies have changed, our minds have changed, our physical nature's changed. Yeah, we don't we feel the I think we do feel the fear, and we don't do it anyway. We are maybe nervous to hear the answer. I've been with my wife now for 26, 27 years, married for 20, 23 years. And we don't sort of sit down and have that conversation. And I sometimes would want to, but then I think, oh my goodness, how do I broach the subject? How would you? So this is like free therapy. How do how do I have the conversation? Because there's some things I've been thinking of maybe for a couple of years. I don't want to just burst out with those. Oh, I've always wanted to tie you up. Or my goodness, what? Or this thing we've been doing where you nib on my ear. I've never liked that. How do you create this space where almost where you're not necessarily looking for the other person to react in the moment. You're just looking to inform one another and leave time to digest things. Does that make sense?
Right, which is why it ends up happening in a therapy office,
Yes.
because it's sort of a container for the uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I should market that, a container for the
Yeah, I
uncomfortable.
like that.
And because I'm asking people to report into me, they
Mm.
have permission to
Hmm.
say these things.
Yeah.
And it's also about homework assignments,
Yes.
because a lot of what I'm telling people to do is go back and write down, your likes, your dislikes, your must-haves, your can't stands, your I
Hmm.
really wish it if this. And so it's like they're a student for me, and they have to come in and they need to have a report done, right? And so then they might be the first time that their partner's hearing the answer is in a therapy office. But again, it's contained. We're just blurting it out at dinner. I think at home might be more difficult.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when it does get blurted out is on holiday and vacations. Right when you want to have a wonderful time, someone will say, I just always hate sleeping next to your snoring. Something like
Yeah.
that. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh no, this is going to ruin the whole trip, right? But I do believe that couples need to have check-ins, and we go to the dentist and we have our
We
teeth
do.
worked on
Yeah.
and cleaned, and so that we don't end up having a terrible root canal. And with couples therapy, I feel like it needs to be a routine cleaning, and then so that you don't end up having to have a major surgery or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, part of one of my goals is to try to make more resources available to people, that they can do some types of counseling online and on their own. And
Mm.
we're a ways off, but we're getting there.
Mm. One of the questions I've been really excited to ask you is, and you mentioned this on your website, so I'm looking forward to the answer. But what is the secret sauce for a long lasting, not to say long lasting, a long lasting happy relationship?
I do believe it is respect.
Hmm.
And you almost touched on what I was going to say, because mutual respect, well, love and respect are tied together. We don't
Okay.
think people can truly have love if they don't respect each other. They might have attraction, affection, they might
Yeah.
have, great teamwork as far as parenting goes, but the love and respect piece is tied in our brain, actually. So the secret sauce is a mutual respect. However, I have to add to this that you have to be supportive of a couple of your partner's ever changing self. So, in other words, if you're going to respect that person, are you going to respect them as they change over time? Because people will tell me, well, he was never like that before. When I married her, she was skinny. And, well, he used to really love it when I did this, or that was her favorite perfume when she was 25 years old. And I keep getting it to, for her every year. Well, people change.
Yeah,
People change. They change what they
they
want and
do.
they change what they like. And so part of respect is like figuring out how to embrace the changes and communicate them over time. Because really, respect means you have autonomy and you have boundaries. So couples think about boundaries within the coupledom, like we have boundaries so that other people can't intrude in our relationship and gossip and backstab or create infidelity or, whatever our boundary is. But each individual has a boundary. Each
Mm.
individual has autonomy, and so you must respect that. And there is an ever changing dynamic. And over time, unfortunately, some couples just lose respect for each other, whether it's the way they're carrying themselves, whether it's their drinking habit, whether it's their failure to show up as a parent or help provide finances for the family. And when that respect gets worn out or worn down, that's when you lose the love.
Yeah, yeah. And I hadn't put them together, but it makes complete sense. It's almost not, yes, not thinking about the person somebody was and loving and respecting that person, but recognizing who the person is and loving and respecting that person. Because, like you say, we do change. So, my wife's had two children. I've had two children. The children might leave home. Who knows how that will feel? As I get older, I might have more erectile problems. My wife might go through menopause. So we are going to change emotionally and physically. But yeah, ultimately, I think if you do respect one another, then you are going to be more willing to have those conversations and work on things really. So no, I like that answer. One of the things that I read in Love Metabolism was when you explored some couples that have mismatched needs, and that one person might want a lot more frequency of intimacy, might want to spend a lot more time with the partner than the other partner does. And how do you help people that perhaps over time their expectations or needs from one another become different, have become further apart than they were perhaps when they fell in love right back at the beginning?
Yeah. This is actually the stem or the root cause of most of the arguments, believe it or not. And when people aren't getting their needs met,
Mm-hmm.
they get annoyed, they get frustrated,
Yeah.
they believe that their partner should mind read and should just know that they should just be helping more around the house, or they should just be bringing home flowers more often, or they should be initiating sex more often. And that mind reading is really a lie. I mean, there's nothing there. Even if you've been together 40 years, we cannot always count on the familiarity to be accurate in the mind reading. So the the love metabolism, I took that from my background in fitness, because
Mm-hmm.
as a fitness trainer, which is one of my other careers, is someone is trying to get in shape, we always have to look at the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of the workout, whether
Mm.
it's walking workout, whether it's weightlifting workout. But if someone's going to improve themselves, how often or how frequently are they working out? How intensely? Is it a 5 pound weight or a 25 pound weight? And what's the duration? Are they running 20 minutes or are they running 60 minutes? So, using frequency, intensity, and duration, when you apply it to a couple, the overarching topics that couples, anticipate as far as like love languages are going to be their communication, how frequently, how intensely, how long the conversations are, their sexuality, right? How frequently are they intimate? What is the duration of a sex bout? How intensely, like how passionate is it? And it's everything. It's quality time. How often do you want to go on dates? How creative is the date? How long is the date? Is it a day date? Is it an hour dinner? Is it doing a puzzle? So all of these aspects with gift giving and acts of service, like how often do you help me out in the kitchen? All of these things could be mismatched along the way. And some people, as we've been talking about change, they were okay before with the certain amount of, say, help
Yeah.
around in the housework. And then when both are retired, hey, we need to renegotiate these roles and who's doing what. I don't want to do the laundry anymore. I'd rather be the one that does the car maintenance or the lawn care, the gardening. So the mismatches are always easy for me to find
Mhm.
because they are what the fights are about. And so, with my philosophy, we need to come together and ask for what your need is. That is how simple it is. You need to be loving about it and not blaming, but not the mind reading situation, because then you get the silent treatment and the snubbing and the slamming of the door and fine. And, it's just, it's terrible. And so,
Recognizing symbol.
I demand a daily debrief for all couples and a weekly business meeting. And the daily debrief might have how your day went and what's happening with the children's schedule, but really it's a check in, emotional intimacy check in. The daily debrief is, hey, I have a need that's not being met. Can you hold me? Can you help me? Can you listen to me? Right? That's where you ask. You have to ask. And this is where we don't get resentments built up. Oh, 10 weeks ago, you forgot to take the garbage out.
Yes.
Well, ask for what you need in love, not with
Mm.
blame. And this is where we can fix the mismatches. I thought you were okay that every Friday we went out to have pizza. No, that's not enough quality time for me. I want to do something different.
Mm. And that absolutely resonates with our intimate times when we're going to have sex or we're giving each other pleasure. That we It's funny, we sort of, I guess, try and second guess what the other person, what's going to help the other person enjoy something. So I think you're like this when I do this. You rather than saying, I want to do this, or what do you want to do, or having those discussions. And I think some of that, I think, does come down to how we've been programmed by society to think of sex as a very particular act and not to recognize. I guess if you, I always think if you change the word sex for pleasure, feels very different, because it can get incredible pleasure by giving somebody a massage or kissing or looking at somebody, brushing somebody's hair. All of those things are a part of pleasure. But I think sometimes and if we get older and maybe sex is more difficult physical activity is more difficult for lots of reasons. It makes it harder. But when we think about all these little things that we do, holding hands or cuddling or whatever, they're all part of the intimate process, I think. And sometimes we think, well, sex is sex. And does that make sense?
Yes, and I think those daily debriefs, I mentioned the weekly check-in,
Mm.
the business meeting. This is where you can really dig in a little bit deeper. So the daily debriefs might be 15 minutes or something when
Mhm.
you're having your dinner at night, but the business meetings are always an hour, and that's where I get into what the sex calendar is. We have an exercise where, who's in charge of this, and does it have to be a mystery? Because there's usually a feeling that one person's always initiating,
Yeah.
or the other person is always rejecting, or someone has a higher need and doesn't know how to be kind about getting those needs met. And so at the business meeting, I usually do this calendar with even and odd weeks and give people, they're in charge of things. Like if you're in charge of week 2 and 4,
Mhm.
that's all up to you. Check with your partner to make sure they don't have a long work day on a certain day, but you're in charge. So no one has to think, oh no, is it my turn? Am I always the one initiating?
I like
And
that.
then I have all kinds of cues that I allow couples to like light a candle, a certain candle that's just somewhere in the house. It kind of like gives them a message that, hey, I'm interested
Hmm.
tonight, I'm available. There's emojis that people send as well, but you are spot on that society has made this very mysterious. And it does not have to be.
Yeah, I like the notion of, yeah, it being more of a shared responsibility and a shared excitement, really. Because if you are typically the one that always instigates everything, first of all, there's a fear of being turned down on a particular time because the person doesn't want to have sex, as opposed to doesn't want to be intimate because you haven't had a discussion. And then, yeah, the pressure's on to just stick to the same routine, always do the same things, and those things. So does that? Well, it must do. That requires, I guess, safety in a relationship. What would you? How would you define what safety looks like in a healthy relationship?
Right, exactly. Well, that is something that is built
Hmm.
with, well, it's reliability and dependability, but it's really having each other's back. Like if the foundation of the relationship is secure, that something has been built over time where you know that your partner will defend you. They will have your back. They're not going to share your intimate secrets with
Yeah.
the world. You're not going to share even your relationship problems with your neighbor. There's certain sacred things that allow you to know that your partner is your best friend and you can be vulnerable without feeling fearful. And that rejection thing I know is huge, especially in the area of sex, but it's with a lot of other things too within the relationship, the vulnerability. Safety
Mm-hmm.
and security comes from trust. Trust is built over time, trust is proven, trust is showing up, trust is being reliable and dependable, and trust doesn't judge. Trust might be curious about something and ask why and how, but it doesn't shut you down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wish more people had premarital counseling. I wish more teenagers learned how to trust, who not to trust, because, they just publicize all of their personal life over
They
TikTok.
do. They do. Yeah.
So, of course, I could go on and on about this topic, but it is very difficult for couples to talk about intimacy if there isn't safety.
Mm. And mm, and then because trust is so fundamental to a happy and healthy relationship, sometimes one partner or another can betray another person's trust, whether that's in cheating with somebody, having an affair, or whatever, or talking out of turn, etc. How the two parts, I guess. First of all, do you think it's possible to rebuild a relationship even stronger if one partner's cheated on the other? And then secondly, if a couple come to you and they do want to work on things, but one of the people has betrayed the other, where do you start with that? How do you? Yeah, one month. Well, she cheated on me, he's cheated on me. Well, I don't want to leave them, but what do we? Yeah, how do you get them to start?
This first question answered, yes, you can
Okay.
rebuild a relationship. You can save a relationship when there's a betrayal. You can continue. And actually, in fact, most people do. I think it's 72% of couples that have had infidelity, for instance, continue
Hmm.
on.
Wow.
And their relationship can be strengthened if
Yeah.
they've processed it, right? Not
Hmm.
just push it under the rug, but if they've processed it.
Yeah.
Younger relationships that where people haven't been together so long, like the beginning, the first 3 years, those can end
Hmm.
quickly. And the betrayals come in all kinds of forms, like you mentioned. I had a guy that was every Tuesday and Thursday, he was telling his wife he was going to night classes to get his college degree. And in fact, he was going to the bar and drinking. He had failed out of his first class and he just was too ashamed and embarrassed. And so
Yeah.
3 years later, she wanted to go to graduation. And of course, he
Oh my
hadn't taken any
goodness.
of the courses.
My
So that is
goodness,
a
that is
type
a
of a
wonder.
betrayal. Yeah,
Wow.
that's a
Yeah,
betrayal.
absolutely.
And so lying or omitting truths are also betrayals. With infidelity, I have an entire mechanism, um, and it really requires coming clean. It really requires putting everything out on the table and coming clean. And it's always best if someone admits to a mistake rather than being found out.
Yeah.
That's always best. And it's really a risk, right? Because if the person can clean up their act and
Hmm.
keep on going and the other partner never finds out, which is always the goal, then we never really hurt them or harmed them. Problem is the truth prevails. It tends to always come out, even if it's 20 years later. So they think they're going to be rejected if they tell their partner that if they admit everything, then they're going to be left. And that could happen. But if their partner finds out somehow the hidden secret, they can be left.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it's like, okay, you did this and then you hid it for 20 years too. So maybe that's even worse. So the first thing I do is really like an entire revealing with a clause of non-judgment, just sort of listening and absorbing and letting that person not justify what the betrayal was, but just be able to talk from their heart.
Hmm.
And then the second step of this, which is usually a week or so later, is the person that was receiving that information is allowed to compile a huge list of questions. And I tell people, don't ask it if you don't want to know. And some people might just have two or three questions, like how did this start, or how long
Yeah.
did it go, or how many times did you get with
Hmm.
Brittany or whatever. Other times it could be 100 questions. What did she smell like? Was she better than me? Were you doing this and that in the car?
Mm.
And so it's really hard for the couple to get through this. But I have found it is literally the only way to start fresh. Because if you don't have all the information, we make it up in our mind. And
Yeah. We do.
sometimes we make
Incredible
it up
iceberg.
worse. It's
Yeah.
worse. Sometimes we
Yeah.
make the story worse than it really even is. We make it into this big grand episode. And I remember this one girl, young woman in her 20s, was so ashamed that she had cheated on her husband. I come to find out all she really did is give him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. But she was acting like she'd had this illicit affair that had gone on for, 15 years. So everyone has different degrees of what they feel is, cheating or betrayal. So getting all of that out in the open. And there's not really a lot of apologies or I'm sorries or forgivenesses. It is information sharing.
Hmm.
And if we don't do this and we don't have all the details, then I find you keep beating each other over the head with it for years to come.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like 10 years ago when you cheated on me, right? Or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
15 years ago when you liked my sister better than you like me. Or, oh, I see how you're looking at that person. Is she going to be or he going to be your next one? And so this clearing, I call it, coming clean is really necessary. And then you have a vote. Each person has a vote if they're going to stay or leave. It's kind of like discernment counseling when we decide, is there enough good to stay or is there too much bad and we need to leave? But everyone gets to vote and everyone should have all the information to make that choice. And what I find is most times people stay.
Do you get situations where the partner that has been the betrayer, that their language is in a, well, if you hadn't put all that weight on, if you weren't always working, if you were more interested in, and how do you, because you must have to sort of say, look, that's not helpful. It's blaming each other backwards and forwards. That we're playing tennis, aren't we? See, because you I guess you want it to be cathartic that it's everything's out there, but because something causes somebody to betray somebody else, I guess. So you have to get to the cause of it at some point. But yeah, you don't want the person to be deflecting back to the person that's been betrayed. That's been betrayed.
And so I have them use words like, I was vulnerable
Okay.
and I did this and that and the other thing. At a
Hmm.
weak moment, I did this and that or the other thing. Or
Mm.
without thinking straight, I did this and that or the other thing. Or after a few too many beers,
Yeah.
I did this and that and the other thing. So they're still owning it as I to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah.
And that way it's definitely received by the other person softer.
Yes.
If it comes down to the blaming right away, blame shifting, you
Yeah.
were always gone and this and that, then the person is going to they're less likely to forgive and
Yeah.
receive that. However, when we get to the end of this type of therapy, I call it couples in crises. I
Hmm.
just wrote a course on this on my website. When we get to the end of this, which might, in my practice, take 12 weeks, might take 16 weeks, depending on how much information and how people absorb it. We do a prevention plan. And the
Okay.
prevention plan has some of what you were starting to suggest, which is if this isn't going to be an issue for us ever again, one way we can do prevention is the following. Maybe there needs to be more date nights. Maybe there needs
Hmm.
to be more sexual intimacy. Maybe we need to have a workout plan together and both of us can, feel better about our bodies and lose 20 pounds. And this
Hmm.
prevention plan might get to the root of some of the causes, but I really try to keep it to the very end of how
Mm.
can we guard and protect this relationship moving forward.
Yeah. Because I guess one person potentially is thinking, "Oh, I just want things to go back to how they were," which is completely wrong. Because if you go back to things how they were, well, it's going to happen again, isn't it? It's almost, yeah. How do we step into the future, really? Which is what you're saying is about how do you create that plan that okay, well, with things were difficult before, I feel uncomfortable with this, or I felt vulnerable here, but actually, our plan going forward, we're going to actually talk and communicate, and that's going to help us be quite different. So, as a, I guess as a connection to that, on your page on your website where you talk about intensive individual therapy as opposed to couple therapy, I think one of the clients there, when they were talking about what they felt, that they discovered the most vital relationship they had was with themselves. And I do think we perhaps again in our education, our schooling, our society, we're not really taught how to have a loving and trusting relationship with our with ourselves. And how do you advise people to move from self doubt and judgment of ourselves to recognizing our self worth and loving ourselves?
Mm. The self critic is there in
Mm.
everyone. I mean, I think we all have that critic inside of us that's, speaking the negative, and we
Mhm.
want to advocate for ourselves. We want to be the ally of ourselves. So I really like this idea of parts
Mhm.
and speaking in that way. Like, well, there's a part of me that is really anxious about something. But there's another part of me that is very excited about this change, say, moving to a new career or a new
Mm.
town or a new home or a new college, right? So the critic is, I feel that maybe I don't have it in me, in this example, to change. Change is hard. I can't change. I'm afraid. I've always been a homebody, or I've never liked change. That language, the more we rehearse it, does put down neural pathways in our brain.
Mhm.
So, two things can be true at once. Two things can always be true at once. So, advocating for ourselves is I'm really excited, because when you're excited, you're going on say a roller coaster at
Yeah.
an amusement park. You're really nervous. It's going to be a big drop, but you're excited. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay the ticket to go
Yeah.
on to
Yeah.
the amusement ride. So those are closely tied. And so we ask people, what part is coming up for you? Is in the critical part that's coming up, what is the other side? Or is there another side where you can show love to that part and say, well, that's okay. You're there, you exist, but over here, I'm going to build my confidence and I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to take a risk. And it could be exciting. It could be the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'll listen to you over here, but I'm going to go ahead and focus this way. And that's a lot of what the CBT therapy is, the
Mhm.
cognitive behavioral therapy, because what we're trying to do is take the negative reel that we have going and do some kind of thought replacement.
Mm.
And that's been probably the number one therapy that's been proven for the years. This new one I've been talking about regarding parts, what
Mhm.
parts are coming up. You must love all of your parts, the good and the bad and the ugly, so you can love someone else, because we're critical of our partner's parts we don't like. but we have them too. So self-love has to be put in place. And usually I have people write out all their strengths and all their gifts and all their talents. And so they can identify, if the critic is coming up, what we can do to sort of override that with one of our strengths and speak it
Mm.
forth. Like, oh, that might be true, but I'm really good at this other thing. And that's what builds the self-love.
Mm. It's interesting how much fitness and mental and physical well-being has played such an important role in your life and in the role of the lives of the thousands of people that you've helped, really. But I think if you look at what's happening around the world today, I think we're probably the first generation, or this generation coming out, is the first one that's going to die at a younger age than their parents. We've got a obesity crisis, certainly in the UK, and I know in the US as well. More people are on medication than ever before, and I guess if we're not in good physical metabolic shape, if we're not healthy, that's another reason not to love ourselves, or a reason to sort of chastise ourselves or whatever. How important do you think good physical fitness? And I'm not talking about elite athletes. I'm just talking about the ability when you're 60 or 70 to play on the floor with your grandchildren, the ability to walk a mile when you're 60, which a lot of people can't do, the ability to be able to go shopping and just do the things you want to do. How important do you think that is? And this is a massive question. I know there's many billions of dollars being invested in trying to find the answer. How do we address that? How do we help people recognize the sheer value and importance of just being healthy?
Well, I could answer this in so many different ways. I'm going to try to stay with the relationship
Mm-hmm.
type path on this because I did create a workout series for couples. We have proven that when couples do things together, be it go on a hike, a walk, a
Mm-hmm.
bike ride, a stroll, paddling, that their bonding chemicals increase. There's dopamine, there's serotonin, there's oxytocin. So, as far as the actual act of fitness, there's a huge benefit in doing something together.
Yeah.
Aside from that, people that are physically fit
Mm-hmm.
have more stamina for their sex life. They
Yeah.
have a better body image, and so they don't feel like they have to cover up in a long flannel nightgown and, turn all the lights off, and they don't want to be seen because they're embarrassed of their love handles and their flab and all of that. So people that have a fit body feel better on the beach and in their shorts and in their tennis skirt, and that shines. That's attractive. It's
Yeah.
very attractive when you feel confident in your skin and in your body. And to your note regarding aging together, nobody wants to be the one that's pushing around the other person in the wheelchair.
Yeah. We don't have to be
And they're
carers. We want to be lovers, really. Yeah.
And the caregiving thing happens more times than not, and the finger gets pointed. If you would have kept yourself in shape, maybe you wouldn't have had the heart attack. Maybe you would have if it's in your family genetics.
Yeah.
Well, what could have you done? And we don't want to go back and have those regrets. So, couples, if they can stay healthy as long as possible, yes, they could be great grandparents. I love taking care of my 2-year-old granddaughter. We're always climbing around and going to the little gym and all of that and the dance classes. You want to be able to keep up with them, right? And you want to be able to keep an active lifestyle together. And we do know that sex life is very affected by your fitness level, your cholesterol level, your blood pressure, right? So all of these things tie into relationship and intimacy.
Mm. So a lot of the things that would do people a lot of good aren't necessarily that. Like say, going for a long walk, or a short walk. Start with a short walk, then a medium walk, then a long walk. Going out in the evening with your partner for a walk with a dog, or just walk outside. First of all, you get the benefit of being outside in nature, which is extraordinarily positive. But also, it doesn't take long to see fitness levels increase. And there's so much research now about the power and importance of and not only cardiovascular, but lifting weights as well as you get older, and helps prevent osteoporosis and so many things. It helps people with the menopause, women, etc. And it's so important. I mean, again, it's not about going to the gym and pumping iron. This is just about being able to do the things you want to be able to do and living as healthy life as possible. So, yeah, I do hope we see a change in how we approach that.
But I can say too, though, if you have a partner and you are
Mhm.
partnered, people are more motivated to get fit
Yes.
because it's one thing going out by yourself
Yeah.
and running a 5K. And it's another thing getting up on a Sunday morning with your partner and getting your water bottles and getting ready
Yeah.
and going
Yeah.
out to the woods because then you have a shared experience.
Mm.
So we find that having a workout buddy, there's better adherence to the fitness plan.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And you're both seeing the benefits in each other, so it's what could be better than that, really. But
Hmm.
you are probably the guest I've had that's had the most life experience in terms of what you've done, in terms of different areas, etc. And you don't seem to have any suggestion of stopping, thinking, well, that's enough now, slowing down, etc. What do you think the next phase looks like for you? What are the next things you're excited to tackle?
Well, I think that I want to get more resources out to couples.
Yep.
And you're doing it uh, fabulously with podcasts. And so I'm thinking about a relationship app on your
Mm.
phone.
Hmm.
I just released the relationship roadmap, which has 7 different courses that couples can do at home and do on their phone at their own pace. And it's hard for people to get to therapy. I mean, traditional
Yeah.
therapy is not going to work for everyone. So I'm thinking of how to get resources out. And it's not really books anymore as much. It's podcasts, it's apps on your phone, it's online courses. So I want to do that. And then, of course, my other passion is the global advocacy. And
Mm.
I will always continue to be an advocate for women and children in developing countries. And I'm always involved in a project that helps in that area as a consultant for the United Nations. So I hope to keep doing that till I die and traveling and going into red light districts and figuring out what's happening in the sex trade and what's happening to women and children. So that's going to be a forever thing for me, helping couples, helping women, helping the world.
There can't be much more important than that, really. For sure. I mean, very sadly, we do still see and hear about sex trafficking, sexual assaults, and terrible, terrible things that just don't seem to get the for the scale of the challenge. They certainly don't seem to be talked about or addressed anywhere near as much as we could imagine. And a lot of things are happening within so-called developed countries, as well as all the countries that are developing. And yeah, anything we can do to help women, because all the research still shows that women are paid less than men, treated worse than men, all of those things. And with a daughter, you with a sort of granddaughter, you just hope that when they get to our age, that things have changed dramatically. But things don't change by themselves, do they? Unless somebody's willing to do it and put the effort in as you are, and nothing will change really.
I
Just
know.
uh, two more questions, if that's okay. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. So one is, and this is quite a personal one, so you don't have to answer it, but one of the things that you ask people is what makes you say yes to a relationship and what lights you up. And I wondered if you could answer that question. What lights you up when you say yes to something?
Well, I'm sure that this comes out of all grandparents' mouths, but it's leaving a legacy. It's
Yeah.
definitely leaving a legacy. And then for me, it's leaving a legacy of healthy relationship. And you asked me at the very beginning, how were my parents that were born in 1920? Well, there wasn't a lot of public display of affection,
Hmm.
right? But I want my granddaughter to see me and my husband holding hands and hugging and kissing in the kitchen and dancing around with her in the middle of it. and just having like a great example for all of my girls and my granddaughters and grandsons, if I have any of those, just of leaving a legacy of open, loving relationships. And even just in our family, that would be
Yeah.
a wonderful way to go out of this world, knowing that I left something.
That's a wonderful answer. Because it's amazing how far one person's feelings and emotions can travel. So you transmit them to your daughter's granddaughter, they transmit them to their friends, and before you know it, it spreads out like ripples on a pond, doesn't it? One little stone goes in, and before you know it, it just travels very, very, very quickly. And then the final question really was, and I think I've always thought this must be a really difficult part of a lot of what you do, is that you obviously meet with couples and individuals that aren't going through the best times, and that I imagine people probably rarely come to you and say, "Oh wow, Gina, everything's wonderful. I just wanted to come and pay you to tell you that." They typically come to you and say, "Look, things are terrible," or "I've had some very bad trauma in my life. I'm not ready to talk about it." How do you feel that you want to show up for them and really be there for them, but you don't want to? It doesn't benefit anybody for you then to carry that trauma on and become the trauma holder. So how do you sort of protect and nourish your well-being?
Mm. People that are in the caregiving field,
Mm-hmm.
not just psychologists and psychiatrists, but people that do hospice care, social
Yeah.
workers, even nurses, have to have a really special filter for compassion fatigue, is what we
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so even people say, "Oh, I think I'd be the best counselor. All my friends come to me for help." I'm like, probably not. Probably not, because you're taking it on and you're absorbing it. So the filter for compassion fatigue is strongly in place for me. And if you're asking me just like on a personal level, I work out every morning to set
Yeah.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
it just sort of just clear everything and start fresh and have all those happy endorphins, going in me. And then at the end of the day, I have a slice of time between closing my door to my last patient and showing up in my home. And that slice of time for some people is on their drive or the train home or the subway. And some people like to do music or listen to podcasts or journal and kind of like leave it there and leave it in the office and come
Mm.
and bring your best to your family instead of your exhausted self. For me, on my time between leaving the office and coming home, I have a pretty strict routine of affirmations and mantras, and I know them well. I write them down. I look at them on my phone app sometimes. And they're those kind of prosperity, abundance, loving, fulfilling mantras that really work for me. And I just have to do that before I return home, because it's almost like taking every story, which I could see 10 couples in a day or 12 even, is taking their story with compassion and giving it back to them, and taking the story and giving it back to them, and taking the story because it's their story to own. I'm just
Yeah.
reflecting back to them what I see and hopefully some helpful tools. But I have my own story, right? So I need to come with all of my best for my grandkids, my husband, my grown children. And so that's my routine.
Oh, I like that. I imagine if there's ever a time when you can't work out in the morning for travel reasons or whatever, it just feels very different, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Um, I find if I try and get out early in the morning and walk the dog and in the fresh air, regardless of what time of year it is. And if I don't do that, if I do it later in the day, even though I've done it, just doesn't feel the same. So my day hasn't been set up properly. I haven't sort of, almost gone from that sleep state to work state with that big, just nothing in between, that change. But yeah, I think that having a routine like you do, I think the affirmations, I want to look into that. That sounds really, really interesting. Well, just I want to say a huge thank you for two things, really. One, obviously, selfishly, for joining me today. It's been very kind of you. And secondly, for just for the massive work that you do, the energy you give off, and the amount of work you do. I would highly recommend people go and look at your website. I'll put the link into the chat. But there are so many courses on there. There's love quiz if you want to have a look at that, which is really interesting. There's Are You Ready for a Relationship? So there's so much there. So I'll put all the links onto the chat, and there's so many well thought through and intelligent courses that people can do, like you say, in the time. It's not having to go to a therapist in the city, but just going in there and looking and seeing what's there. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.